Hi, everyone. Welcome to week 7. This week, we are going to study chapter 7, which is about utility. In economics, utility means satisfaction or pleasure from something that you're doing, from your consumption. And this is probably the only chapter that we're going to talk about consumers and how they are able actually to maximize this satisfaction or the utility that I'm talking about. After this chapter, we are focused on production. We're focused on how basically businesses operate. So this is the only chapter that we're going to discuss about consumers. I tried to keep this chapter short, so follow the notes. Some of the important things, definitely look at the lecture notes, watch the video the videos that I posted on D12, and also remember that I always put a link to another video where I talk over the lecture notes, so you can get actually more information. So important thing that you need to know about this chapter is the definition of utility, and also some of the important concepts that we discussed that are related to utility, like marginal utility and total utility. We have, I believe, 2 formulas in this chapter. So take a look at them, make sure you know how to use them. I also provided an example for you on D12, so take a look at that. Remember, we use these marginal values basically a lot in microeconomics. We also had marginal benefit and marginal cost, if you remember, in chapter 1, we defined them. And from now on, we're going to use actually lots of these marginal values, starting with the marginal utility. And of course, we will learn in the future that how we can calculate the marginal benefit and marginal cost that we defined in chapter 1. But marginal in general means marginal means extra, additional. So okay, turn off my phone. So marginal means additional, extra. So when we say marginal utility, it means the extra satisfaction that you are going to gain when you, let's say, buy extra unit of good X, okay? Or your extra satisfaction from eating, let's say, extra taco. That's your marginal utility. Total utility is your total satisfaction, okay, from your consumption, from buying something, okay? So marginal utility is basically measuring the change in total utility when you consume more, when you buy the extra unit of output, okay? So look at the formula for marginal utility. That's the change in total utility divided by change in quantity of goods and services that you purchase. And also pay attention to the graph we have and the relationship between the total utility and marginal utility. Another important topic we have here that I want you to pay attention is the marginal utility. It's related to marginal utility. And it's called the diminishing marginal utility. And also basically it tells you, also trying to look at the notes because I don't want to miss anything. Yeah, these are the important things before we talk about the diminishing marginal utility. So the diminishing marginal utility basically tells you that your this extra satisfaction or the additional satisfaction or the additional utility that you're gaining from consuming one more unit of output at some point starts to decline. And the example that I have on the notes is tacos. And before I talk a little bit about that example, let me just tell you that the unit we have for this utility is called utils. And it is actually hard to measure your utility or your satisfaction, but economists have their own ways of ranking basically different goods and services. And according to that ranking, they come up with numbers for this total utility or the total satisfaction. And I want you at this point for our course to just accept all these numbers. You can be critical. For instance, if you don't like taco, your total utility is 0. But accept these numbers. We don't want to make it complicated here. So The example that you see basically in this class are just based on some random numbers, okay? They are not necessarily accurate in terms of this utility discussion that I have here for you. But as you will see in the notes, and when you look at the graph, you will see that the total utility starts to increase, your total satisfaction from consumption when you start buying or using or eating something starts to increase very, very fast, because probably you are enjoying that product a lot. So the marginal utility at the beginning is super duper high. But as you buy more and more, or you eat more and more, your total utility is still going up, but at a slower rate, at a decreasing rate. And that's the point where your marginal utility starts to decline. Then your total utility reaches the maximum, and that's where your marginal utility is 0. So the additional utility that you're gaining from an additional, let's say, taco that you are eating is going to be 0. And then the total utility after that maximum point just starts to decline. So that's the place that you are not basically enjoying your taco or enjoying buying more of, let's say, good X, okay? And that's the place your marginal utility becomes negative. So it's possible to have a positive number for marginal utility, 0, and even negative. So look at that relationship. So we call this decline in marginal utility diminishing marginal utility that I already mentioned. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. So take a look at the graph. The graph is also important because this shows basically the relationship between total utility and marginal utility. The goal of this chapter, however, after defining total utility and marginal utility, is basically to figure out the point that the consumers actually will be happy buyers, happy consumers. And that is when we can find where the maximum utility is happening. Where is the maximum satisfaction for our buyers? And for simplicity, we're going to consider that our buyers are purchasing basically 2 products only, or eating 2 products, 2 different types of food at a moment, because it's easier for our conversation, okay? So for our buyers, depending on their budget, depending on the prices of the products that they purchase, we can actually define where they are able to maximize their utility. Remember, in chapter 1, we talked about budget line, right? So we had all these attainable points on the budget line, right? So here we are trying to figure out which points on the budget line, which 2 points, or which combination of the 2 products that our buyers buy or eat or consume will give them the maximum satisfaction, because there are hundreds, thousands of different ways that you can spend your money. So that's why we had several points on the budget line. But which point on the budget line, or which combination of the 2 products that we put on the budget line, on the X and Y of our budget line, will give our consumers maximum utility or maximum satisfaction. And for that, we have this utility maximizing rule, or we call it consumer equilibrium condition, where will basically tell us how the consumers can achieve that maximum utility. So this consumer equilibrium condition or utility maximizing rule tells us that if our consumers can basically equalize the marginal utility per dollar of all the goods and services that they consume. In this example that I gave you, that between the 2 products that we have, then they are happy buyers. They are able to maximize their utility. So we should take a couple of steps to basically achieve this maximum utility. First of all, we need to know the prices of the goods and services that we buy. We need to calculate their marginal utility, and then you are going to divide marginal utility by the price of each product. Then you are going to equalize them. Then you can basically have that combination of goods and services or the 2 products that will give you maximum satisfaction. Of course, you can extend this formula, as you will see on the notes, for several goods and services that we purchase because that's more realistic. Do we always achieve maximum utility? No, because remember, sometimes a point might be outside your budget line. Sometimes the prices of the products you purchase are just too high for us as buyers. But remember that this formula, this little consumer equilibrium or these utility maximizing rules are just a method that help us to understand how the consumers can maximize their satisfaction with the given prices, with the given budget that they have. Okay, so is this condition ideal? No, but it will help us basically to understand how the consumers can maximize their utility. Okay, so remember also this formula. So we have this marginal utility formula, and also we have this consumer equilibrium condition, or another name for it is utility maximizing rule. I also put an example in the lecture notes for you for this understanding basically the utility maximizing rule better. Again, also look at the homework question to basically see what type of question you will get on the test. Okay, so let me know if you have any question. As I said, I tried to keep this chapter kind of short. So again, the important definitions are utility, marginal utility, diminishing marginal utility, and this consumer equilibrium condition. But also make sure you look at the graph and know how to use the formulas. Okay. We're going to skip chapter 8. So next week, we're going to study chapter 9. Chapter 9 is kind of the foundation of chapter 10 and 12 and even 13 that we're going to discuss in the future. So I want you to pay attention to all the graphs and more formulas that we have in future chapters. But chapter 9 is super, super important, okay? And we'll be focused on production side of the economy starting next week, okay? So let me know if you have any question, and till next time.